The plan that Trump and his team devised was daring. He would publicly challenge the media outlets, demanding they retract their lies and apologize to the American people. But he didn't stop there. He would go on national television and speak directly to the citizens of this country, addressing the smear campaign head-on. "This will be my most important moment yet," Trump said, looking directly into Hope's eyes. "I'm not just fighting for myself. I'm fighting for every American who has ever felt betrayed by the system. The time for silence is over. We are going to expose the lies and tell the truth, no matter what the consequences are." A week later, in a high-profile press conference held in the heart of Washington, Trump stood before the media with the weight of the world on his shoulders. The cameras flashed as reporters scrambled to get their questions in. "Mr. Trump, do you believe you've been unfairly targeted by the media?" one reporter shouted. Trump didn't hesitate. "Absolutely. They've been spreading lies about me and the movement I'm leading. They've been trying to silence the truth because they know they can't control it. But the American people deserve the truth, and they're going to get it today." The room fell silent. Trump had just declared war on the media. But it wasn't just the news outlets he was taking on. It was the entire establishment that had conspired to keep the people in the dark. Trump continued, "I'm not here to just win an election. I'm here to win the battle for this country's future. I'm here to give the people back their voice, their power, and their right to know the truth." Almost immediately, the media began to respond with fury. Networks like CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox News launched full-scale attacks on Trump, attempting to discredit his words and portray him as a dangerous threat to democracy. They played clips of his past mistakes, ran sensational headlines, and tried to stir up chaos. But instead of weakening Trump's resolve, the backlash only strengthened his support. People saw through the smokescreen. They saw the real enemy, the elites who were doing everything they could to protect their own interests while keeping the American people in the dark. As the media onslaught continued, something remarkable began to happen. The American public started speaking out. People from all walks of life, across all political spectrums, began sharing their own stories of how they'd been betrayed by the system. Social media platforms were flooded with hashtags like #TruthMatters, #Expose the Elites, and #The People Speak. The movement was no longer just about Trump. It was about all the people who had been silenced, ignored, or lied to. It was a movement for truth, for justice, and for the future of America. With each passing day, the tide turned in Trump's favor. The more the media attacked, the more his support grew. People saw the establishment for what it was, a corrupt, self-serving entity that had betrayed the American people for far too long. Trump was no longer just a candidate. He was a symbol of resistance, a champion for the people. And as the days turned into weeks, Trump prepared for what would be his most important rally yet, a rally that would define the course of his campaign and possibly the future of America. The day of the rally had arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. The event was being held in the heart of a crucial swing state, one where Trump had seen an overwhelming surge in support over the past few weeks. The venue was packed, the energy electrifying as thousands of passionate supporters waved flags and cheered. But this rally was different. This wasn't just another campaign event. It was a statement. Trump was going to address the people directly, face to face, and lay everything out on the table. It was his moment to rally the troops, solidify his base, and draw a line in the sand. As Trump took the stage, the crowd erupted into applause. He looked out over the sea of supporters, his expression both determined and resolute. His voice rang out over the microphone, steady and full of conviction. "Thank you. Thank you, everyone. It's incredible to see so many people here today, standing together for the future of this great country." Trump paused as the crowd cheered even louder. He could feel the momentum building, but he knew that this wasn't the time for celebration. The real work was about to begin. You've all heard the lies, the fake news, and the endless attempts to tear us down. But today, we're going to do something different. Today, we're going to expose the truth and stand up for what's right, Trump declared, his words hitting home for everyone in the audience. The atmosphere was electric. His supporters stood tall, their voices roaring in unison, ready to fight for the truth. But Trump wasn't done yet. This rally wasn't just about defending himself, it was about defending the people. As Trump moved through the crowd, shaking hands and waving to supporters, a sudden hush fell over the venue. From the corner of his eye, Trump noticed a young girl in the front row, tears streaming down her face. Her mother was beside her, trying to comfort her, but the girl seemed inconsolable. Trump's eyes locked onto her, and without thinking, he made his way through the crowd toward her. The microphone still in hand, he bent down to her level. "Hey there, sweetheart," Trump said gently, his voice soft yet commanding. "What's going on? Why are you so upset?" The girl sniffled and wiped her tears away, but her voice was shaky. I don't understand why people are saying bad things about you. You're the only one who's ever stood up for us." Trump's heart swelled with emotion. He had seen the news reports, the attacks, the lies. But this moment, this interaction with this young girl, made everything real. He understood now more than ever the weight of the responsibility he carried. He smiled warmly at her. "I promise you, we're going to make things right. Together we'll make America better. No one's going to stop us." He stood up, and the crowd began to applaud. But it wasn't just for him. It was for the truth that he was fighting for. Trump's gaze swept over the audience, meeting the eyes of every person in the crowd. He could feel the power of the moment surging through him. Trump raised his hand high, signaling for the crowd to quiet down. The sound of thousands of people holding their breath filled the air. "I want everyone to hear me clearly," Trump began, his voice now booming with authority. "What's happening here today is bigger than just an election. It's about the future of our nation. It's about protecting the American dream. It's about ensuring that our children and grandchildren have the same opportunities we had. And it's about standing up to the lies that have been fed to us by the elites and the corrupt media." The crowd erupted in applause once again, but Trump didn't pause. He kept going, each word dripping with passion. "We will not back down. We will not be silenced, and we will never stop fighting for what's right. Together, we will take back our country and make it stronger than ever before." Trump's words rang out like a rallying cry, uniting everyone in the crowd. They knew that this wasn't just another political speech. It was a declaration of war against the corrupt forces that had been controlling the nation for far too long. As the rally continued, it became clear that Trump had hit a nerve. The media outlets, who had previously been relentless in their attempts to tear him down, suddenly found themselves at a loss for words. They couldn't attack the truth, no matter how hard they tried. For the first time in a long time, the American people were seeing through the smokescreen of misinformation. They were hearing the truth directly from the man they had chosen to lead them, and that truth resonated deeply within them. As Trump wrapped up the rally, the crowd chanted his name, louder and more fervently than ever before. He raised his hand in a final wave of thanks, his heart swelling with pride. He had not only defended himself, he had stood up for every person in that crowd and for every American who had been lied to by the powers that be. And in that moment, Trump knew that the tide had shifted. The media could no longer control the narrative. The American people had taken back their voice. This rally wasn't just a victory for Trump, it was a victory for the truth, for the people, and for the future of the nation. As Trump left the rally, he knew that the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The fight was far from over, and the forces against him were powerful. But he also knew that the people were with him, and with their support, he was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The battle for America's soul was just beginning, and Trump was ready to lead the charge. The media had been quiet for the first time in weeks. Their usual barrage of attacks had slowed down, but Trump knew this moment of calm wouldn't last. The elites, the media, and the establishment would regroup. They'd try to find another way to sabotage his movement, to undermine the truth that had been so clearly laid out for the American people. Back at his campaign headquarters, Trump sat behind a large mahogany desk, his fingers lightly tapping against the polished surface. The room was dimly lit, a contrast to the bright lights of the rally just hours before. On the table in front of him was a large map, dotted with pins marking key states. His campaign strategist, Sarah, stood by the window, watching as the city lights flickered in the distance. "We've made a strong impression today," Sarah said, turning to face him. "But the opposition isn't going to let up. We have to be prepared for the next wave." Trump's gaze was intense as he leaned forward in his chair. He'd faced adversity before. This wasn't the first time he'd been knocked down, and it wouldn't be the last. But now he could feel the stakes, higher than ever. "I know they'll come at us harder," Trump said, his voice cold and unwavering. "But we have something they don't, our people. The truth is on our side, and the more they attack, the more they push people to our side." Sarah nodded. "But we need a strategy that keeps us ahead of their next move. They'll come after your family, your business, anything they can use to discredit you." Trump's jaw tightened. "They can try, but they'll never tear us down. What we're doing isn't just about me. It's about the future of this country. They underestimate the power of the people." As Sarah turned back toward the window, Trump's mind raced. The rally had been a turning point, but he knew the real battle was just beginning. The media, the establishment, and the global elites were all going to come after him with everything they had. But what they didn't know was that he was ready. He wasn't just fighting for himself, he was fighting for the millions of Americans who had put their trust in him. And he wasn't going to let them down. The next day, Trump was preparing for another rally, this time in a more rural part of the state. The momentum was on his side, but something felt different. As he walked through the corridors of his campaign bus, preparing for his speech, a figure appeared in the doorway of his office. It was General Mark Lawson, a retired military officer who had come out in support of Trump during the early days of his campaign. Trump had always respected Lawson's no-nonsense approach and his loyalty to the country. "General," Trump said, offering him a firm handshake, "what brings you here?" Lawson smiled faintly, but didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I wanted to talk to you about something serious, Mr. President," he said, his voice grave. "The opposition isn't just about ideology anymore. There are forces at play that go beyond just politics. We need to be ready for whatever comes next." Trump's eyes narrowed. "You're talking about the deep state?" Lawson nodded. "Yes, they've been working behind the scenes for years. If they see you as a threat, they'll do whatever it takes to stop you. You can expect everything from disinformation campaigns to more direct attacks." Trump absorbed the gravity of Lawson's words. He had suspected for some time that there were hidden hands at work, manipulating the course of events behind the scenes. But hearing it from someone like Lawson, someone who had served at the highest levels of the military, made it all the more real. "Then we'll have to expose them," Trump said, his voice steady. "If they think they can play dirty, they've got another thing coming." Lawson gave him a tight-lipped smile. "That's the spirit, but you'll need to be careful. They have resources, networks, and allies that could be more dangerous than you realize." Trump's mind was already turning. The stakes had just gotten higher. But he wasn't about to back down. The American people needed someone who wasn't afraid to confront the dark forces pulling the strings behind closed doors. And Trump would be that person. As the day went on, Trump's rally in the rural area turned into another massive success. The crowd was fired up, more passionate than ever before. And yet, in the back of his mind, the warnings from General Lawson echoed. He could feel the weight of the unseen forces closing in, but he knew one thing for certain. The more they came after him, the more they galvanized his supporters. They weren't just fighting for Trump, they were fighting for their country, for their way of life. That night, as Trump lay in bed, he couldn't sleep. The challenges ahead were bigger than anything he had faced before. But he wasn't afraid. The deeper the opposition dug in, the more they revealed their true nature. And with every attempt to bring him down, they only made him stronger. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new obstacles. But Trump was ready. He wasn't just going to fight for himself, he was going to fight for the soul of the nation. And the people would stand with him every step of the way. The morning after the rally, Trump stood before his team in a large conference room, a sense of determination radiating from him. The media had already begun twisting the events of the previous day, casting doubt on his sincerity and the true message he was trying to send. But Trump wasn't concerned with their narratives. He knew that the American people could see through the lies. He addressed his closest advisors, including Sarah and General Lawson, who had joined him for the meeting. "We're not just dealing with a campaign," Trump began, his voice resonating with authority. "This is a movement, and movements don't go quietly. Every time they push against us, they only make us stronger. We need to stay on message, stay focused, but most importantly, we need to keep exposing the truth." Sarah nodded, her eyes sharp with understanding. "The media will continue to attack, but the people see the reality. They know you're fighting for them. We've seen it in every town, every city. It's the same everywhere." Trump looked at her, his expression grim. "It's not enough to be seen as the outsider. We need to expose what's really going on behind the scenes, the corruption, the manipulation, and the forces that are trying to hold this country back. We have to let the people know what they're really up against." General Lawson spoke up, his voice low but forceful. "You're right, sir. The deeper the media digs into your past, the more they'll reveal their hand. They'll try to undermine your credibility, but the people will stand by you. We need to focus on showing them the truth about the elites, the political establishment, and the people pulling the strings." Trump leaned forward, his eyes focused. "I want to do a series of interviews, not with the mainstream outlets, the ones who will twist everything I say. I want to speak directly to the people, through social media, through platforms they can trust. I want to make it clear that this fight is about something bigger than just me. It's about America." The room was silent for a moment. Sarah and Lawson exchanged glances before Sarah spoke up again. "We can make that happen, but you'll need to stay on top of the narrative. The media will spin this into something ugly, and we have to be ready for their backlash." Trump's lips curled into a small smile. "Let them come. The more they attack, the more they show their true colors. We've got the people on our side, and as long as we keep pushing the truth, we'll win this battle." The plan was set. Over the next few days, Trump's team worked tirelessly to set up interviews and media appearances that would put him directly in front of the people. They made sure to bypass the mainstream outlets that had consistently twisted his words and messages. Instead, Trump would take to smaller, independent platforms, media that had built trust with their audience and weren't influenced by the corporate elites. He knew this was the key to speaking directly to the American people and making his message heard without the filters of the media. As the interviews began, Trump's raw, unfiltered truths came through in every word he spoke. The elites and their puppet politicians were exposed for what they truly were: self-serving, manipulative, and completely out of touch with the needs of ordinary Americans. The political establishment, once untouchable, was now on the defensive. The battle for truth had officially begun, The interviews weren't just about attacking his opponents, they were about offering a vision for the future. Trump spoke about the need to return power to the people, to protect the values that made America great, and to fight for a future where every American could thrive. Every word he spoke hit hard, cutting through the lies and revealing the heart of the issue. He didn't just paint a picture of what was wrong, he showed the American people how they could rise above it. As the interviews aired, the backlash from the mainstream media came quickly. They tried to twist Trump's words, accusing him of fueling division and hatred. But the more they attacked, the clearer the divide became. The American people, who had long felt ignored and overlooked, could see the truth for themselves. The rallies continued, each one bigger than the last. People came from all walks of life, from every corner of the nation, to hear Trump speak. The energy in the air was palpable. This wasn't just about politics. This was about reclaiming control of their future. But with every rally, the opposition grew fiercer. The elites, the media, and the political establishment knew that their grip on power was slipping, and they would do anything to stop him. They began targeting Trump's family, trying to drag his children into the fight. But Trump stood firm, unshaken by their attempts to distract and discredit him. As the campaign entered its final stretch, Trump knew the stakes had never been higher. The media's attacks had become more desperate and the opposition more determined. But he also knew that the people's trust in him had never been stronger. The final showdown was coming. The establishment, the media, and the elites had thrown everything they could at Trump. They had tried to destroy his reputation, to tear down his movement, but they had failed. Now it was time to turn the tables. Trump's next move would be the most powerful yet, a bold step that would expose the full extent of the corruption and manipulation that had controlled the country for so long. The truth would finally come to light, and the American people would rise together to take back their country. The pressure had been building for months. The mainstream media, the establishment, the politicians, all of them had thrown everything they could at Trump, trying to discredit him, to silence him, to stop the movement he had ignited. But nothing had worked. In fact, the more they attacked, the stronger he became. Now it was time for Trump to make his final move, a move that would reveal the full extent of the corruption within the system and expose those who had tried to undermine the will of the people. Trump had spent the past few weeks secretly meeting with key allies, gathering evidence, and preparing for what he knew would be a monumental moment in American history. He had everything he needed: documents, testimonies, and behind-the-scenes recordings that would shake the foundations of the political establishment. But he also knew that this wouldn't be easy. The media would go into full attack mode, trying to spin the narrative in their favor. They would label him a conspiracy theorist, a liar, anything to discredit him. But Trump was ready. He knew that this was bigger than just a campaign. It was about restoring power to the people and exposing the dark underbelly of the system that had kept them suppressed for so long. It was a Friday afternoon when Trump made the announcement. He called a press conference, but this wasn't just any press conference. It was set to take place in a small, intimate setting. Just Trump, a few trusted members of his team, and the media that had covered his campaign from the beginning. It wasn't going to be the usual spectacle with dozens of cameras and a sea of reporters. This was going to be personal. This was going to be raw. When the press conference began, the room was filled with anticipation. The reporters sat quietly, waiting for Trump to take the stage. He walked in, his presence commanding attention as always. His face was calm, but there was a fire in his eyes, a fire that told everyone in the room that this was not going to be a typical speech. He stepped up to the podium and looked around the room. "Thank you for coming today. I know many of you have been waiting for this moment. You've been following this campaign, watching as we expose the corruption that's been plaguing our nation for decades." The reporters leaned in, eager to hear what he would say next. But today, Trump continued, his voice steady but filled with weight. "We're going to take this fight to the next level. Today, I'm going to reveal something that will change everything." The room was silent, every eye fixed on Trump as he reached for a stack of documents on the podium. He held them up, and a murmur spread through the room. These weren't just any documents. These were pieces of evidence, emails, recordings, and classified information, proof of the deep corruption within the government, the media, and the political establishment. As Trump began to reveal the documents, the room erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambled to get a closer look, their phones out, capturing every moment. But it wasn't the media frenzy that mattered. It was the content of the documents themselves. What Trump revealed was staggering. The documents exposed collusion between major media outlets and politicians. They showed how certain politicians had been accepting bribes, using their positions to manipulate the economy and sway public opinion. And the recordings? They captured conversations between powerful figures discussing how to undermine Trump's campaign, how to keep the status quo in place, and how to control the narrative. Trump's team had carefully compiled the evidence, ensuring that every piece was verifiable and irrefutable. The media tried to dismiss it, but it was impossible to ignore. The truth was out, and it was damning. The backlash came swiftly. The media, the politicians, and the elites who had been exposed fought back, calling the documents fake, accusing Trump of fabricating the whole thing. But the damage had already been done. The American people could see the truth for themselves. As the revelations spread, so did the outrage. Social media exploded with reactions. People from all walks of life, from all corners of the country, were sharing the documents and demanding accountability. "Drain the swamp" became the rallying cry once again, but this time it wasn't just a slogan. It was a movement. For the first time in a long time, the American people felt empowered. They had been lied to, manipulated, and controlled for far too long. And now they were ready to take back their country. The rallies grew larger, the crowds more passionate. Trump's approval ratings soared, and his message of transparency and truth resonated deeply with voters across the nation. The establishment had underestimated him, and now they were facing the full force of the people's will. The final showdown was set. Trump knew that the establishment wouldn't go down without a fight. They would do everything in their power to hold onto their grip on the country. But he was ready for them. The coming months would be a battle like no other. The media would continue to spread lies and disinformation, trying to discredit Trump and his movement. The political establishment would push back, using every tool at their disposal to maintain control. But Trump had the people on his side, and as long as that was true, he knew that he couldn't be stopped. As the weeks passed, the battle between Trump and the establishment escalated to unprecedented heights. The revelations from the press conference had shaken the political world to its core, and Trump was now in a full-fledged war, not just with the media and the elites, but with the entire deep state that had controlled the nation for decades. The establishment wasn't going to roll over and accept defeat. They fought back with everything they had, spreading misinformation, launching smear campaigns, and even attempting to discredit Trump's team. But what they didn't anticipate was the resilience of the American people. Trump's supporters had always been loyal, but now they were angrier than ever. They were tired of the corruption, tired of the lies, and they were ready to fight for the truth. Trump knew this wasn't just about politics anymore. This was about the future of the nation. He wasn't fighting for power. He was fighting to restore the country to its rightful owners, the people. The media, once so powerful in controlling the narrative, was now on the defensive. With the documents and recordings Trump had revealed, their credibility was in question like never before. But instead of backing down, they doubled down. News outlets across the country, especially those that had been most vocal against Trump, began spinning new narratives, accusing him of being unfit for office and pushing even harder to discredit the evidence. But their efforts were in vain. The truth was out there, and it was becoming impossible to ignore. Social media platforms erupted with support for Trump. People were sharing the documents, spreading the word, and calling for accountability. "The truth is out" became the next viral hashtag, and it wasn't long before mainstream politicians, many of whom had been on the receiving end of the revelations, started to take notice. Trump had shaken the foundations of the political world. The power players who had once called the shots in Washington, D.C., now found themselves on the defensive. Several of the politicians implicated in the leaked documents were forced to step down or face investigations. The power balance was shifting, and for the first time in a long time, the American people were gaining back some of the influence that had been stripped away from them. The establishment tried to rally, but the momentum was clearly on Trump's side. His rallies grew larger, his approval ratings soared, and he continued to call out the corruption at every turn. His message resonated deeply with voters of all stripes, from conservatives to independents to disillusioned Democrats who had felt abandoned by their own party. But as the movement grew, so did the threats. Trump was now facing not just political opposition, but personal attacks. The media launched new smear campaigns, attempting to assassinate his character. The deep state tried to undermine his efforts at every turn, but Trump refused to back down. He knew that the fight for truth and justice was one that was worth every sacrifice. With the political landscape shifting beneath their feet, Trump's team began to plan their next move. They knew that the establishment was going to fight tooth and nail to hold on to power. But Trump had something they didn't: the trust and support of the American people. The final push would be a culmination of everything Trump had fought for. His team worked around the clock to prepare the next phase of the movement, an all-out campaign to ensure that the revelations he had exposed would lead to real, lasting change. But this wasn't just about exposing corruption. It was about fundamentally changing the way the American political system operated. It was about draining the swamp, yes, but it was also about rebuilding the system from the ground up. Trump had a vision of a government that worked for the people, not the elites. He knew that achieving this vision would require more than just winning an election. It would require a complete overhaul of the system, and that meant taking on the biggest and most powerful players in the world. As the campaign ramped up, so did the attacks. The media, the establishment, and the political elites all rallied together to try to stop Trump. But this time, they weren't facing just a single candidate. They were facing a movement. The people had had enough. Trump's rallies were a sight to behold. Tens of thousands of people packed into arenas, waving flags, chanting slogans, and showing their unwavering support for the man who had taken on the system and won. It was clear that this was no longer just a political campaign. It was a revolution. As Election Day approached, Trump knew that the stakes had never been higher. The establishment was pulling out all the stops to try to discredit him, but the momentum was on his side. The people were ready for change, and they were willing to fight for it. When Election Day finally arrived, the tension was palpable. The air was thick with anticipation as voters across the country went to the polls. The media, once so confident in their ability to control the narrative, now found themselves scrambling. The polls were neck and neck, and the outcome was anyone's guess. But as the results started to roll in, it became clear that Trump had done it. Against all odds, against all the attacks, against the full force of the political establishment, Trump had won. The country had spoken. The people had taken back their power. The morning after the election, the country was still reeling from the shock. Trump's victory had sent shockwaves through the political establishment, the media, and the world at large. The final count had yet to be fully tallied, but the writing was on the wall. Against all odds, Donald Trump had won. And it wasn't just a victory for him, it was a victory for the people. The elites, the ones who had controlled the political system for decades, were furious. Their worst nightmare had come true. They had underestimated the power of the people. As Trump celebrated his triumph, there was a palpable sense of dread among those who had spent years in the shadows of power. They weren't just going to take this defeat lying down. Trump's victory had shaken the foundation of the political establishment, and they would stop at nothing to claw back the control they had lost. In the coming days, a battle like no other would unfold, a battle that would determine the future of the country and the very nature of the democracy they had fought so long to preserve. It started with whispers, rumors of an impending counterattack. Behind closed doors, the establishment began to mobilize, calling in their allies from every corner of power. The media, the big corporations, the deep state, all began to coordinate their efforts. Trump's victory had been a humiliation, and they couldn't let it stand. The first salvo came in the form of a media onslaught. The very networks that had once touted Trump's success now turned on him with a vengeance. The spin began almost immediately. They attacked his legitimacy, questioned the validity of the election results, and dredged up every piece of dirt they could find. The goal was simple: to delegitimize Trump's victory and to rally the people against him. But Trump, undeterred, was ready. He had known this was coming from the start. He had prepared for it. The truth had already been revealed. The corruption was already out in the open. He wasn't going to back down now. As the media continued its smear campaign, something unexpected began to happen. The people, the ones who had supported Trump throughout this long and bitter journey, began to rally. They were sick of the lies, sick of the corruption, and sick of the elites trying to control their lives. Across the country, rallies began to form. Protests erupted in cities where the establishment had thought they still held sway. Thousands of people took to the streets, demanding that their voices be heard. They were no longer content to let the elites control their future. They were ready to fight for the country they loved, and they were ready to fight for Trump. It wasn't just a political movement anymore. It was a revolution, a movement of the people, by the people, and for the people. The establishment had underestimated them, and now they were paying the price. Trump, ever the strategist, knew that he had to make a bold move to take control of the narrative. He called an emergency press conference that would change the course of the battle. The media, eager to see what the victor had to say, tuned in from all corners of the globe. When Trump took the stage, the energy in the room was electric. His supporters cheered from the sidelines, while his detractors waited, eager to see if he would falter. But Trump was unshaken. He had faced down the media before. He had battled the political elite before, and he wasn't going to back down now. "This battle is not just mine," Trump said, his voice ringing with authority. "This battle belongs to each and every one of you, the hard-working people of this nation who have been silenced for far too long. We have exposed the corruption, we have fought the lies, and now, together, we will take our country back." The crowd erupted in applause. For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of hope in the air. Hope that change was possible, hope that the people could reclaim their voice, and hope that the fight for truth and justice could still be won. As the days passed, the battle reached a fever pitch. Trump's supporters continued to pour into the streets, and the media's attacks grew more vicious by the hour. But Trump's base was solid, and they were not going to let the elites win. Behind the scenes, Trump and his team worked tirelessly to expose the deep state's final attempts to subvert the election results. They uncovered more evidence, more corruption, more backroom deals, and more lies. The documents and recordings they released were enough to make even the most ardent skeptics take notice. It became clear that the battle for control wasn't just about power, it was about the very future of democracy. The final showdown came when the establishment's last-ditch effort to reverse the election results failed. The courts ruled in Trump's favor, and the American people, having made their voices heard, stood firm. It was the ultimate victory. A victory not just for Trump, but for the principles of freedom, justice, and the rule of law. As the establishment's power crumbled, the people's revolution had triumphed. Trump had not just won the election, he had won a battle for the soul of the nation. In the end, Trump's victory was more than just a political triumph. It was a new beginning for the United States, one where the people once again had a voice, where the elites no longer controlled the narrative, and where the truth would reign supreme. The battle had been long and hard, but the people had won. And now, with Trump at the helm, they would rebuild the country from the ground up.